Hey y'all, it's your Cosmic Gardener, sister friend Jessica Ballard here. How you doing? It's a little wild out there, a little wild energy out there. Maybe wild is one way to put it. Definitely change happening. I mean, I haven't been able to make a video, not that I make a ton of them, but for a while, because it's like, what do you say? But I've been thinking a lot, and I've been thinking on something kind of, I don't know, this theme kind of keeps coming back to me, so maybe it's helpful for y'all's. Um, so obviously I've been thinking about the astrology a lot. That's just kind of what I do all the time. Not all the time, but I just find it really meaningful and helpful. And we're in this year of these great planetary shifts. Neptune is moving into Aries, starting a whole new cycle. Next month, we've got Uranus moving into Gemini, Saturn will be moving into Aries. And if you look at the history books, I mean, it's intense, right? It's like Civil War started the day before Neptune moved into Aries last time. The Uranus and Taurus transition, moving into Gemini, was the time of World War II. I'm not making light of this. This is fucking crazy. And obviously war is here. Our country is actively participating into devastating wars. And it's just really easy, I think, to look back at the history and think, oh my God, this is it. And just sort of go into that tunnel of, you know, this is what we're doing. This is warrior energy. And yeah, I think it is in some ways. But I just keep, the more I was sort of like looking up, historically thinking about these great shifts, there were obviously lots of other things happening that weren't just war, but like war wins the headline. You can't really look up what was happening at those times without war being on the forefront. And so I was like thinking a lot about stories and history and how history is written, which is something I think about a lot because I think that, not that I study a lot of history, honestly, but I think that it's interesting who writes it, and how the stories are told. And it's very important to me how I tell stories and how I use my thoughts and words because I think words are fucking powerful and our minds are powerful. And I'm just for agreements, y'all, like impeccability with my word. But, let's just tie this into like in honor of Black History Month. As a white person, do you think I heard very many stories of amazing Black and brown humans growing up in Kentucky? Not at all. There were very clear narratives about how Black people and white people interacted, and so much of the historic figures were popular and important, mostly white males, a handful of like incredibly brave and powerful, Black folks. Nothing about indigenous people of this land other than some like real generic stuff. And this is sort of how history was brought down to me. And many of us, here's the history of the world. And you're just like trained to think that like that is the reality. And you see it as the reality. And yet, as a grown woman, of 45 years old, I'm living now. We are all living now history in this moment. We are making it. It is becoming, we are a part of it. We are speaking it. We are hearing it. We are acting on it. And what I know to be true is that the vast majority of us will not be, written down in the history books or, studied in school if we still have. Who knows what the future holds? I'm just thinking a lot about like the power and vitality and interest and miracles and magic and wisdom and like so many amazing things that I personally experience in my life just through the people I meet, not necessarily through the media, nowhere where it's like written, and so when I kind of think about like who writes the story and what's written as history, it kind of doesn't make, I mean, here's the deal. I have to imagine, yeah, that there were just millions of people back then whose stories were never written, but led fascinating, heroic, interesting, spicy, generous, caring, loving, healing, oracular lives. And we never knew about that. And I guess that gives me kind of hope and excitement for this now moment. If I'm recognizing that history is alive and is being made, and it is not passed down necessarily through our books and texts and scrolls and through the word, right? I mean, we pass it down through our energy. We pass it down to our descendants, for those of us who have children. We pass it along in the stories that we tell that shift and change, and the actions that we make that influence someone, that makes a decision that influences someone else, that does something really great. I'm thinking about how many stories were interwoven into the story of the one great person that we read about in the history books. And I get excited about that. And I think about all the different ways like that our ancestors, and particularly, women would craft like myth and story and, information and recipes and magic and history and protect like into their crafts, their embroidery, or the way that things were made, or the totems that they had, or the adornments that they wore. There's so much like intention and story in all of these like non-written forms of communication that are passed down through the year. And I feel like this sense of like connection and responsibility for how do we recognize like what an active part of this living mythology that we are in, as I have my titrated, measured relationship with various media sources and my appropriate grief and just shock at things that happen, I have to pull myself out of that kind of collective, like, into this one sacred moment and recognize that I get to be here and I get to be part of like so many stories, and I kind of don't give a fuck if they like are told in thousands of years, if the human race is still here. I know that energy is infinite and beautiful. And I guess I just want to remind everybody of that. And I know that my, African American brothers and sisters absolutely know this. Like, y'all have been knowing this. I know that our indigenous people have been knowing this. I'm not over here trying to act like this is news. I can't imagine what it's like to have no record, of your family name. I mean, so many people who are adopted, and there is no history to speak of in that version. And yet I know that the medicine that created them, the stories that created them is so powerful. So I've just been thinking a lot about that. And I've been thinking a lot about like, how do I write this story, right? What is this story about? We've had Jupiter in Gemini, which is very much about what we say, how we listen, how we interact, with communication, how we cross-pollinate ideas, how we synthesize, we gather information. And Uranus will be going there. And I think about Uranus and I'm like, I want my story to be a story of, I don't know, maybe surprise. I don't know. Maybe, I think obviously liberation and freedom and my words to reflect what I believe around that. But I also know that Uranus is so uncertain. So how will my story be, written, woven? Let's say woven. Yeah. And I'm thinking about Neptune moving into Aries and Saturn moving into Aries. And Aries is such a, can be such a warrior energy because it is initiating and it's instinctual and it's fire and it's forging a place for itself in the world. And we think about that with Neptune and Saturn, and that definitely kind of shifts how we see it. Do we have this perfect view of what that is? Or are we really kind of confused about it or limited by it? And I think we'll have lots of ways to learn, in the coming year, what we stand for, what is our sort of righteous conflict, and how do we come at it from a place of understanding and community versus just the will to win and be right, just think about all these things. Anyway, I'm talking about this a lot too, because we've got, Mars, the ruler of Aries, has just stationed direct, and that's given us a lot to think about, right? About what we're defending and what makes us angry and what we want to do, or feeling like we can't do anything. And I feel like with Mars, energy is going to be moving as signs move into fire signs, and Mars is direct, in the next few weeks. But I also wanted to say just a little more astro here, peeps, but I'm just really... So right as Mars directs, we've got Venus stationing retrograde on Saturday, and Venus is stationing retrograde in Aries, conjunct the moon in Aries, and Venus is what we value, what is beautiful, how we connect with each other, who we love, what we desire, what we like. And in Aries, that can be very much what do I like? And we might like a little sparring, but I think we can get this really powerful opportunity as Venus does her 40-day descent, retrograde from Aries into Pisces and then back into Aries, to join Neptune. We can really take an opportunity. Venus, any retrograde gives us that opportunity to just reflect, think about, circumstances outside of us could definitely force us to reflect, like an ex-boyfriend shows up, or we have some, challenges with money, also a Venus talk that we have to really sort, or maybe something is not in alignment. Maybe we're angry about something that's not in alignment with our values. And we have that opportunity, I think, to really get some clarity and, trust our instincts around our values and what is really key to us in that. And I love that we have this little kind of powerful 40-day, have you heard this number before? 40-day period to really be with that as we're moving into this big, period of new cycles. So if you're even remotely astro curious, think about that. Think about what I just said. Think about what's important to you. Think about, see where you've come around, what you're fighting for and what that fight has to look like, I mean, there are really beautiful ways to address conflict that don't have to be aggressive and dangerous. And when that's the energy that is coming at us, it seems like that's the only option. And maybe for some that is, but yeah, be with Venus if you like. You'll see her be less visible at sunset in the sky, that bright. She's been an evening star. So be with Venus, see what she tells you about what you really love. And maybe think about that in context with what your, one great story is and like what that looks like. And sure, maybe you need to write a memoir, but maybe you just need to like work on following your dream, and being what you love and being kind and doing things that are important to you and yeah, touching people's hearts. So yeah, I will just say, since we've been on this very long video, I've been really into I'm starting to do these astro craft kind of ritual classes. It's not a new thing at all. It's something I literally do like all the time because I love a little ritual to symbolize these astro moments. I love kind of making something physical, with my hands that's sort of symbolizing the element or the energy that we're working with. And I'll tell you, I actually I scheduled 2 vision candle making classes. One on so vision candle, like, you make a vision board, you do collage about what you're dreaming and like what is in your heart. And you put that on, you decoupage that on a candle. So obviously anybody can just do that. But if you want to come to my class, there's info on my website and I'll probably put it in here. But yeah, and then you light the candle. And so every time you light that candle, you put that fire on it. There's your vision. So I scheduled one of those classes for the day Venus goes retrograde and the day it directs. And both of them have a strong area. Like one, the moon is in Aries and one, the sun is in Aries. And it just feels juicy. So if any of y'all are local and want to come, there's one this weekend and one in April. Anyway, I've been on this for a long time. But yeah, putting a little ritual, putting a little intention when you're working, with Venus or with the planets is really, really juicy, really beautiful, and kind of can bring you back to that archetypal work. And I will say, you don't have to overthink it. Like the planets will give you ideas all the time, Yeah. And if you're ever like, ooh, I'm really feeling this, this planet or this sign I want to work with, and you're kind of feeling blocked with like, what's a little ritual I can do? I'd love to put more on my website. I haven't really done that yet, but you can shoot me an email and be like, girl, I just feel like I'm really in a Saturn time and it's hard and I want to, work with it. Jessica, do you have any ideas about how to engage with that? And do you have any little simple rituals? And I got plenty. So anyway, very long video. It's been a while. Yeah, I love you guys. Hang in there. One day at a time. One magical moment, one potential miracle at a time. One potential miracle at a time. Miracles are always on the menu.